So this position plate, as per the different buttons to do the moving forward and the back side. Okay, these buttons, this is a position plate, and if the upside is a narrow small one, we don't need this position plate. And this buttons left side is get through this vertical plate, and these T's will support this plate and let it go forward. If it's a turn upside, it's impossible to stay here and just drop down. So this one is good enough. For these buttons, we need this position plate moving a little bit forward, and if going like this, okay, and the feeding from here forward and the moving forward, this plate will be moving, and this plate, you see the mountain goes to the edge and it can't be stay, and eventually it will be dropped. Only this narrow side at the bottoms, and you see it can be, the T's can be support the button going forward, no problem, and get into the channels. Okay, the button, this rails adjusting, we're gonna adjust this plate as same levels, using the finger to feeling the top of the buttons and the plate, the guide, the same levels like this. So example, the different buttons with a different thickness, we're gonna let the gaps a little bit higher than the button itself, the thickness of the edges, so that when we change the different button, it can be fitting different buttons easily, as long as it's not too much higher or too much lower as comparing the top of these edge guiders. And the width, the same things. Width, we're gonna not let the button jump out. So when we change the different buttons, all gonna be fitting. These rails, when we release the two screws, we can move this top rails up and inside. But at least we need to not let the guide too much far away, and this can't be pressing the buttons, and so we need to move in a little bit forward, make the rails properly, but each side like 50 microns, 0.5 millimeters. Okay, this plate, this top position plate, you see here with the two springs for adjusting the height of this pressure guide. And normally this plate, the guide to the bottom of to the top of the buttons, so 1 millimeter gaps, and this air hoses is giving the air pushing forward the buttons. When the buttons moving forward, and then this solenoid will release and give the whole pushing the buttons to the forward. These two screws, when we release, we can move in forward and backside, forward and backside. These two screws to control this plate back and forth. Okay. Regarding these rails, the buttons adjusting these two screws adjusting the button, the rails, this plate up and down the gaps, and 这两个是调最右边的。对。These two buttons adjusting this plate up and down gaps. Okay, so we're gonna see these buttons feeding not very tight, but it's moving very freely. So the solution is using these two screws to control this plate up and down gaps. These two screws, this and this, to control this plate up and down gaps in order to move these buttons freely. For this position plate, we have 3 sets of this plate. Big buttons using the narrow plate, the small buttons using the wider plate. We have totally 3 sets of the plate. And regarding these rears, same thing. These 2 screws to control these 2 pins up and down, moving up and down, so we can adjust this plate up and down and then to the proper gaps and then fasten these 2 screws. This rod, the same thing. We're gonna see here this side, there's 2 screws, these screws and these screws, okay, these screws, this and this, to release this screw to up and down, to adjust the up and down the gaps. So this vibration pans goes to the rails. For the gaps, up and down gaps, we need to very smoothly running. Even it's going one on the top a little bit higher, it's not a problem, but it should be very loose. Okay, and when the buttons feed into here, and this rod is pushing, the buttons to the front and drop to the molds. We need to check. This button, the lower rod pushing to the button to drop to the molds. The head and the molds should be within 0.3 millimeters, 0.2 to 0.3 millimeter gaps. You can't be pushing forward. But it should be stopped here with some little gaps between the button and this rod. So 80 or 90% buttons is everything. Most of the buttons can be selected from these packages of this button position plate. We call this a different position plate, holding plate. First of all, these packages, we have different shapes of the CD dials for the different buttons location. Say example, the different buttons, we have a different plate to fit in for the different buttons. Okay, so we need to selection this button locations. We need to selection this plate first. So actually, this button position button plate, we have 2 pieces. First is the fitting for the diameters. Second is for the locations. So this is holding the top positions. So 2 pieces combined together to make this CD buttons holding devices. Okay.